Welcome, everybody. Tonight, we're going to have a nice conversation with Sivan Komatsu, and I'm super, super excited about this because I don't know how many of you caught various pieces of this, but a couple months back, the Is It DBT conference had a situation where one of the presenters had some really horrific slides that were presenting Zionism, which is essentially our relationship with our ancestral homeland and the idea of Jewish self-determinism there. Presented that in some really awful slides. We'll go into the details a little bit later, but as an advocacy organization, the Jewish Therapist Collective kind of has a history of advocacy and leadership and things, but also spotlighting folks in the community who are, in addition to wearing their clinical hat, wearing the other one, which is advocacy to try to make the Jewish community, the therapy community, or both a better place, and doing the brave work that's sometimes uncomfortable, but hugely, hugely important. And so tonight we have Sivan Komatsu, who is a school psychologist and a graduate student in psychology up in Washington. And she's also very passionate about DBT. And most importantly, tonight, she took a really brave step to be incredibly public about very articulately and warmly, thoughtfully, gently, and really poignantly pointing out these alarming concerns about this therapist leader who was advancing some really harmful views. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, a little background about Sivan, what it was like to walk through that experience, and then also some self-care and some things moving forward that she'll be able to share with you guys. So welcome, Sivan. Thank you so much for sitting down with us tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So I guess before we jump into this incredible piece of advocacy and bravery that you took on, who is Sivan before all of this? Who are you? How did you get into the field of psychology, and what excites you about it?
Yeah. Like you said before, I am living in Seattle right now. I'm a PhD student in school psychology at the University of Washington. I'm from New York, Long Island, and went to Dickinson College, which is a little liberal arts school in Pennsylvania, where I studied psychology. And going into college, I knew that I wanted to be in the mental health field in some capacity, but I wasn't totally sure where. I did a lot of work with kids and teens with disabilities and developmental disabilities specifically, and really enjoyed working in educational settings, like, teaching in Hebrew schools and stuff. And I had a lot of friends who were teachers and special education teachers. And so school psychology kind of married the two, like supporting kids with disabilities and then also youth mental health, and suicide prevention, which are very important to me. So that's why I went into school psychology specifically. Like many Seattle people, I like outdoorsy things, hiking, rock climbing, things like that. My dog, who you might see if he jumps up here, hanging out with him, taking him out for walks and runs and stuff. But yeah, it's a little bit about me.
That's awesome. Yeah, and school psychology, I think it takes a level of dedication and that balance between that clinical eye and all of the testing and discovery about figuring out why students do what and how they show up and what their obstacles are. And it's a really cool space that I think we need to make more space for and create more voice for in our community for sure. So thank you for spotlighting it. So walk us through, I guess you can start wherever you want before this conference. I don't know when leading up to it, you might have gotten the ping that there might be something going on with one of the speakers. And so walk us through that experience of kind of becoming alerted that this conference space might be a little different than you anticipated.
Yeah, so it was the night before the conference. I was taking a red eye from Seattle to Philly, and I was at the gate waiting to board, and I had some extra time, and I figured I'd check and see like the schedule, presentations, decide what to go to. And I saw that some of the talks had slides that were posted. And so I took a look at the slides for that talk, and that's when I That's when I saw those slides that had that very anti-Semitic content. And ironically, I'd actually just seen, I think it was in the JTC Facebook group, that somebody had also was at a training when one of those slides was shared. Like I had seen it that morning. So it was definitely a shock, really felt like a gut punch. And so sort of my like processing, I'd say that started there at the airport.
Wow. Wow. So you're sitting at the gate. There are other people all kind of, and probably mostly immersed in their phones and managing their stuff. And then this like wave of distress hits. So what did you do to cope with that as you were sort of making your way toward Philly and knowing that this was waiting for you?
Yeah, so I started by texting some friends and my advisor and my therapist. And it's like, oh my God, what is happening? Um, so I definitely used a lot of DBT skills starting then. I had to kind of put it away for a minute because I was just so like elevated and dysregulated and like about to get on the plane. So I made a really conscious decision to put my laptop down, put my phone down, and just like get on the plane and like watch something funny. Um, and just kind of distract myself for a little bit, get into wise mind, and then started thinking about, okay, what can I do? So on the plane, I sent an email to the program chairs, um, and ran it by some friends and got their thoughts on it. But yeah, it was hard because I wasn't in like my own space. I couldn't like lay on my couch and cuddle with my dog or like call and FaceTime friends because I'm on an airplane. So I kind of had to make do with what I had, but kind of temporarily stepping away. And then when I was able to cool down a little bit, um, getting into that more
Yeah.
advocacy headspace. And that honestly, that made me feel better because I was like, okay, I can do something about it. It's not helpless.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think just the fact that you kind of couldn't go to your familiar coping touchstones because you weren't at home, right? And so there's always that fork in the road we talk about in DBT between like acceptance and change. But before even getting there, you kind of just have to like get that regulation in and be like, okay, I'm going to pause and then I'm going to orient to what's up and then I'm going to decide what to do. And the fact that you were able to kind of ground while thousands of feet above the earth and then move forward with deciding that change was the direction. Like what a beautiful process and something that many of us I think over the last 16 months, but also for the decades before, um, haven't really had the framework to move forward with. So just the fact that you like, I mean, intuitively, it's like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna do this. It's pretty remarkable. So these emails, did you get a response to them? Okay. Were you expecting one?
No, I mean, it was the night before the conference. It was like the middle of the night by the time it actually got sent.
Yeah.
So I wasn't expecting a response then. When I got to the conference in the morning, I saw one of the program chairs, and that's when I went up and I introduced myself, thanked her for organizing everything, and I was like, I sent this email. I don't know if you saw it yet. I'm sure, you've been running around all morning, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention in case you haven't seen it. And that's when she told me that they did read it, but they were not going to censor the speaker.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. And I think in a little while we'll talk about what other advocacy wins and goals might be when sort of the appeal to those in power who might not be supportive has like a very slim chance of working out the way we hope. Um, so walk me through like during the conference, like leading up to it, were there any points of um, support, connection, joy, anything else that happened in the conference prior to the speaker?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't know many people at the conference, but I did know a couple. So I got to, see people I hadn't seen in a while. I was able to go to, interesting talks, make connections. Was definitely difficult to like be fully present because I was very consumed by it. So there were definitely times where I had to step out and just like go in the bathroom and like splash cold water on my face. I was texting with my mom throughout the day and some friends too, just kind of getting some extra support there. So I did, I was able to be present in a lot of moments and enjoy things, and also it definitely was tricky.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that's kind of a point of acceptance too, where it's like we want to show up and absorb everything and get everything that we need out of a conference, right? But it's like if you're experiencing something where you as an individual or you as a population are, facing this really revolting like incoming thing that okay, it's 5 hours away, it's 2 hours away, it's next. Um, Getting a chance to accept the fact that like, yeah, you're gonna get as much as you can out of it. And also you're human and you're a real person. And how can you have the conference experience that you deserve when there's this aggression just looming around the corner?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a tough situation. So, when you went into Natalie's session, and I will say her name because it was a public conference and whatnot. How did you prepare yourself, and at what point did you know that you were going to go up to the mic to try to address the concerns?
I knew pretty early on because when I in the morning before the conference started, when I spoke to the one of the program chairs, and she told me that they weren't censoring the speaker, she said, "But you're welcome to come and say something during the Q&A."
Mhm.
So I was like, "Okay, I will." Um, so it was. I mean, I definitely did some pros and cons. Like I thought about it, and it was pretty clear early on that it was clear to me that I was going to say something because I just knew it would be harder not to if no one said anything. Um, so, throughout the day, during times where I stepped out, during lunch, in between sessions, I kind of, I jotted down notes on my phone, on the notes app, just to like kind of prepare what I wanted to say. I practiced a little bit, just like saying things to myself. And then as she was talking during her talk, I was jotting down some additional notes on my phone. So I had time to prepare, which was really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, like, you say that you had time, but also, I mean, what a quick turnaround to show up so articulately and to come off so centered, and I'm excited that you mentioned the pros and cons list, right? Because when we have a sense of urgency in front of us of like you have to make this decision right now, or like even within a day, it's this sense of pressure on you that you really have to get that discernment going when you're activated. And so I'm just wondering like what came up. I mean, it's a pretty core DBT skill, right? Because as you're navigating the world. So what came up as like the pros of speaking, the pros of staying silent, the cons of speaking, and the cons of staying silent that you can remember you were kind of musing over?
Yeah, and one thing I like about the DBT style pros and cons list that is that you also pay attention to what's a long term and what's a short term pro and con. And so it was really clear that the discomfort and the anxiety that I would feel was going to be very short term. And that made it really and the way that I would feel if nobody said anything would definitely be long term. So I knew that, the discomfort, fear, whatever I felt during the, 5 minutes or so that I was talking would really like be nothing compared to how I would feel if nobody said anything. So looking at that kind of short term versus long term was really helpful. Um, and another con was, I'm a graduate student. This is, you know, all the big DBT people are here. Like this is where you make connections. This is where you, introduce yourselves to people that I might want to work with one day. Um, and so definitely a big con is I knew I'd be risking some of those relationships. And it was clear like, okay, these aren't relationships that these aren't people that I would want to work for if they had a problem with this. So
Yeah.
that was helpful too.
That idea that, if you're sacrificing essentially like a limb, like you're sacrificing a
Mhm.
part of yourself or hiding it, then that's not really a real relationship anyway. And then if you show up to that, even for mentorship, it's like, well, that nervous system feeling of hiding in plain sight or having to apologize for who you are, like, good call thinking that through. Like, that's really wise. So while you were sitting there, I mean, were you were you like throwing some tip skills, those quick skills into motion while you were waiting for her to wrap up and go to the mic? Like, were you squeezing your feet under the table and stuff?
Yeah, definitely doing some paced breathing, breathing out longer than I was breathing in just to like slow my heart rate down a little bit. Um, I think I had my phone on the desk and I was like looking at pictures of my dog and my friend had sent me like a cute picture of her baby earlier, so I was like looking at that just like easily, quick distress tolerance things um that I was able to do in the
Yeah.
moment there in the room. But I mean, I knew that it would still my nervous system would really be heightened, so it wasn't about like, okay, I'm gonna, not be anxious at all because that wasn't realistic. It was more of just, okay, I need to like keep my composure
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so that I'm able to do this.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, like sometimes it's not about getting to a like a flat line, like, almost lobotomy thing. Like sometimes it's just getting to a place of manageability, right? Yeah. And I think like I would imagine, especially as a DBT clinician, right? Like we always tell clients to kind of take these skills for a spin before they try to use them themselves so that in the moment they're not scrambling trying to figure out what works and they're not relying on something that maybe they can't use as portably. Like none of us are able to dunk our face in a bath of ice water, like one of the skills, in the middle of a conference. It's not something that would work. And so the fact that you practice what you preach and you're just like you embody the work you do, I think probably helped in a huge way for you to show up in the way that you needed to accomplish your goals and be effective.
Thanks. Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the things I like about DBT is like living the treatment,
Yeah,
having clinicians use the skills in their own lives.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now this might be a weird question. So if you like if your clients or your students, well, first off, do they know about your piece of advocacy? Because I know you work a bit in the Jewish community, right?
Yeah, so I'm the school psych at a Jewish high school. So yeah, everybody there, I mean, a lot of people there heard about it pretty quickly. It
Yeah.
kind of spread in the Jewish world.
Do you think that how do you think that your example of really thoughtful, mindful boldness there might make a ripple on the students that respect you and work with you on a day-to-day basis?
I mean, I certainly hope it does. That was definitely an interesting and like vulnerable thing to have something so personal just out there where my students could see it. I mean, anybody could see it. But knowing that like my students would, a lot of them would probably see it. Um, so that was definitely, something that I had to think through and like talk through with, my supervisor and stuff. And I think it was really helpful because I could use that as an example when
Yeah.
I talk with them about skills and, they like hearing, about that I'm actually using the skills. I'm not just teaching them these things and they're like, okay, but like that's not actually going to work, like the actual talking about how I use them can help with buy-in. And so to have that actual like concrete example um, was definitely helpful. And yeah, some of my students who I'm really doing some DBT informed counseling with had seen it. So it was a nice example to anchor.
That's awesome. And like it's one of the things I love about DBT too is how real you get to continue to be. Like you're bringing yourself into the room and you are part of the relationship. It's not this blank canvas thing that we've got in some
Mhm.
modalities, which are great modalities too. But there's something really nice about being able to give an example from your life and not have it be this inner circle personal one, like an argument with a family member or a personal loss or something like that. You can use something that is real without being intimate, super intimate. Um, and I'm glad to see that it's been useful with current students too. That's really cool. Um, so okay, after the session, I heard all sorts of stories about other Jewish clinicians and allies and aspiring allies and people who just didn't know what happened, right? Coming out into the hallway and just experiencing such tremendous distress and having a chance to lean on each other, but also just feeling utterly gut punched. So tell us, what do you remember from that piece? I mean, how present were you to that side of things? What do you know about it?
Yeah, it was honestly like it was amazing in those couple minutes afterwards, more than a couple minutes. But after, the speaker gave her response to my comment, I was crying at that point, and I looked up, and this woman who I'd never seen before, is walking towards me, and my seat was in the aisle it was in the aisle, so there was room there, and she just like knelt down next to me and held my hand. And it was so sweet and so nice because I didn't know a ton of people who were there. Like no one from my program went to that conference. So that was really nice. And then after Natalie gave her response, and they kept going, the presentation kept going. It was, they moved on to like talking about research updates and stuff like that. The woman who was holding my hand and her friend came over and they were like, "Do you want to step outside?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So we walked outside. And then, they were like, "Can we give you a hug?" And I was like, "Yes, of course." And so we're hugging. And then I turn around and there's like, five, six, seven, eight more people coming out, hugging, crying. Like some of them were crying too. Like it was just really, and at that point I'm crying not just because of like how distressing that was, but I'm crying because, oh my God, all these strangers are embracing me and supporting me. Um, so yeah, that was very special.
I mean, I love that, and it's it's an interesting thing because, like, as the last year and a half have unfolded, and, like, a long time before that too, like, for a while in the Jewish Therapist Collective, sometimes I felt like the canary in the coal mine because there were these things where the groundwork for all of this hate was really being laid brick by brick for years, um, but especially in the last year and a half, like with clients who really need DBT skills because of like severe struggles with navigating the world. We talk about chronic invalidation, and as a people and as a population, we as a people face chronic invalidation in the public discourse and in our professional community. And to hear that, I mean, one of the advantages of it being advantages, it's been horrible, but a relative advantage of it being a community level chronic invalidation is that we do get to rely on each other. But I'm curious too, with that community level chronic invalidation, like what have you seen in our professional population as Jewish clinicians, but also in the greater population? What have you seen that has been really striking or jarring or even affirming to you in the last year and a half about us as a people?
I think just the way that we have come together and the way that total strangers will support each other, and that like, you can go and talk, the conference that started the day after is at DBT, the Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapy. It's a much bigger conference, and they have a Jewish, like we call them special interest groups in the different like topics. And so one of them is Jewish issues and cognitive behavioral therapy. And they had like a Shabbat lunch and then like a, Shabbat dinner. Um, and so I went to, and I don't think I knew anybody before that. And it was like talking to old friends, so the way that we can just come together and support each other, and that no matter where we are, we'll find community, I think is really special.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I mean, to that end too, like you were one of the almost 50 therapists who joined us in our trauma or like our mini really intensive trauma therapy experience, lighting the way through trauma in Israel. And I know that it was folks from all over the country, and we had a couple of Zooms ahead of time where some people got to know each other a little bit,
Mhm.
and the WhatsApp groups. But what was that like spending that time with colleagues, some I'm sure who you knew and some who you didn't, and kind of experiencing all of that together?
Yeah, it was incredible. Yeah, I, made connections and friendships that I think that they have continued and will continue. And it was, yeah, just very special to be, most of my Jewish community friends here are not in the mental health field. And so my friends and community in the mental health field are not Jewish. And so to be able to kind of blend those two and to have the Jewish community within, a professional community was really wonderful.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you went, and I still wish that I had been able to join you guys, but it was so nice following along in those 4 days. So, I guess, like, in the aftermath of the conference, we talked about a little bit, like, the hours, the minutes and hours afterward, and then those next few days, and that, Shabbaton with colleagues, at the next conference. So, in watching, I mean, a lot of us only got a sliver of what happened afterward in watching our feeds on Instagram and watching what was going on in the JTC community Facebook group and kind of following some really unfortunate YouTube posts that Natalie had made and certain things. And so what was that like for you as the situation continued to unfold and concerns were responded to in unfortunate ways?
Yeah, I mean, overall, it was a really positive and amazing response.
Yeah.
Much, I mean, I don't really know what I had anticipated or expected. And I guess I didn't expect it to be that supportive and positive. Um, I mean, before Natalie even finished giving her response to my comment, I was getting email notifications from people I had never met who I guess had just like Googled me and found my UW email. Um, and those kept going and going. And then throughout the next conference, I was in the same place, a lot of the same people, or even people who weren't at Is It DBT but were there and had heard about it. It was a very strange experience. It's like people are like, "Oh my God, you're that girl from the one who said something." So it's definitely a little bit uh interesting and unique. Not something that I've experienced before. But overall, it was really, really positive. And, even in seeing Natalie's, YouTube video, which I think was even worse than what she said at the conference. Um, Even though that was really hard, there was still a lot of support and community, so that I was able to like, not internalize it. I was able to laugh about it. Um, and the community just being so supportive, I think is what made this experience positive overall.
Yeah. I love that. And there's something about these layers of advocacy, right? And we're going to have a free workshop on sort of it's going to be called like sort of the scaffolding of advocacy, and it's kind of modeled after like the Maimonides ladder of Tzedakah and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and sort of what are like high risk and low risk advocacy and high yield and low yield and things like that, and how to make sure that you're doing something that isn't gonna completely burn you out or get disoriented or things like that. And I think that the fact that you had that DBT background going into it, I mean, we know how much we learn about sort of internalization of outward experiences that we see a lot of our clients go through, right? And the fact that you have the background that you're able to kind of move through this and know, okay, like this isn't about me, and like take in the good stuff and the positive reflections and that mirror held up to you going, like you're so articulate, you're so brave, and then those other weird things like what Natalie had, I think she had referred to the people who were disappointed in how she spoke as lynching her, which is very painful to us as Jews, especially as the targets of white supremacy and hate, and especially those in the South around Atlanta. Like we know what lynching is, and that's really hard. And what was it that helped you know that like you could internalize the reflections on your character from the colleagues that see you and not internalize the mishigas, that hostility?
um I mean, I think it's can definitely be hard for me to like internalize, compliments and nice things that people say, and easy to internalize the negative things. So
Mhm.
it's definitely something that I have been working on,
Yeah.
outside of this context for a long time. Um, and I think, yeah, just being able to kind of take myself out of it and see that she was coming from a really defensive place. And that, what she was saying was more of a reflection on her and how she feels about everything. And knowing that like I acted in line with my values, I acted effectively and skillfully for me. And so any other, consequences or anything negative that happened to her that was done by other people, like that's not my responsibility. My responsibility was to advocate, to say something, and I did that in a way that aligned with my values, so I felt good about myself. And so, I her own reaction was not going to take away from that. I think if I had been less skillful and, acted not in line with my values, then it would have been easier to internalize that. But I knew that what I did was values based and I felt good about what I did. I walked away with pride and self-respect. And yeah, I wasn't going to let her, take that away from me because she didn't like what the reception was towards her.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, great like points for us to orient to as we move forward in the aftermath of making a brave choice. Um, I think about an interpersonal effectiveness, right? Where we're kind of deciding whether our goal, our dignity, or our relationships are kind of most important and kind of prioritizing those. And it's really interesting in a public setting because there's not just one relationship, right? Like, obviously there's the relationship with the speaker, right? Because you're addressing the speaker, but that wasn't the most important relationship in the room. It was the relationship with all of the other people who were collectively being traumatized by her, the relationship with all of the other people in the room who were integrating her beliefs in ways that could advance anti-Semitism to their own clients, etc. Right? And so as you were figuring out what to say and as you were kind of deciding what decisions to make, what relationships were in the foreground of your mind?
Definitely the other Jewish people in the room. Um, I didn't know many Jews who were there. I mean, I didn't know many people who were there, period. But I think most of the people who I did know weren't Jewish. But I did, notice in the audience as those slides were coming up, people were like whispering to each other and like looking really upset. And it was clear that like I wasn't the only one who felt that way. Um, and I was thinking of relationships with people in the field who were in that room I really admired. Um, and you know, I cared about my relationships with them or wanted to have professional relationships with them. And yeah, my relationships with the other important people in my life who weren't there but would see it and hear about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, I'm really glad to hear that like, like when it comes to relationships, like the people that you got a chance to meet and connect with, like what a beautiful thing. And if there are people that, a partially hidden self of you might have missed out on, oh well, right? And we just kind of move forward. So I guess I guess I want to kind of spend a little bit of time on Jewish joy because we've been increasingly trying to cultivate and hold space for more of that because, the constant grief and worry and nervous system activation of our population is really, it can get really exhausting, right? And so I think in the spirit of, it's not just about navigating the chaos, it's about like Jewish identity is not just about that. There's such depth. And so what what brings you joy these days? What brings you joy as a Jew and as a clinician?
Good question. There's a lot. I would say like humor is definitely a big one. And like, yeah, being able to joke about Jewish topics and like maybe some like dark humor with friends and family is definitely a nice just kind of relief or release, I guess. Um, Media, like Curb Your Enthusiasm, like TV shows and movies that are Jewish or have Jewish characters and that are funny and uplifting. Um, and being around community, being around my students, it's really nice that I see clients in our school site clinic, but most of the time most of my, client facing work is student facing work. It's providing mental health services at a Jewish high school. And so I can relate to them and they can relate to me in ways that I think are really special that we're in the same community. And so being able to, joke and like use words like balagan and mishigas and stuff like in sessions or in evaluations, which is interesting to do. But yeah, that definitely brings a lot of joy and just yeah, celebrating holidays. And I've got a great group of Jewish community here in Seattle that I've found. So
That's awesome. And like, and just the like, I get that same excitement when, a Jewish client has come in and we've got those touch points that we just know that each other has. And it's
mm,
kind of that global family tree where there are certain things that we just can share with each other. And there's something really comforting about that in these times. Um, and I'm really excited because you're going to be coming to the retreat in May on Lag BaOmer for that Shabbaton from May 15th through 17th. And we're going to be doing a lot of like Jewish joy and nature and connection and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm so glad you're coming to that. I think it's going to be really fun to get to hang out with you in person.
I'm excited.
Yeah. We got a DM from someone who wanted to just ask a little bit more about what was on the slides. And I know that we kind of just jumped into process, and my apologies to everybody because, I've been following it so closely that I sometimes forget what everyone has seen so far. And so these were slides from a place called the Slow Factory, if anybody Googles them after the fact. But Sivan, if you can you describe kind of in your own words, like what was on there, so that they kind of understand what was so jarring?
Yeah, one of them was it was like a spectrum of what is like acceptable discourse, I guess. And so on one end, it's like liberation and justice. And then in the middle was like white supremacy. And then on the left was like fascism and racism and Zionism. Um, so yeah, that was jarring. And then the other one was it was an image of a brain and it was the colonized mind. And so, homophobia, transphobia, rape culture, and Zionism, which was right here at the front. Um, and yeah, so just equating Zionism with all these
Yeah.
awful things.
Yeah. And it's such a jarring thing to watch because the term Zionism was something that was created by Jews and for Jews, right, as a common understanding. And when we look at linguistics and history, right, when people like obviously language is fluid, but when people decide to take a heritage term, a term that a small minority community uses to communicate a concept in a concise way, and decides to redefine it and use a definition that completely turns the other one on its head, that inverts it. It's an act of colonization, and I mean I know we hear that term decolonize all the time now, and in many ways that's a dog whistle for anti-Semitism, and in many cases it's not. But those things get kind of flooded together, and it's this situation where when like language theft is culture theft and identity theft, and the idea of um, using our language against us to mean these horrible, horrible things that it never did is is something really difficult to fight. And every time someone who's not part of our population, even someone who is and just doesn't understand that they're moving a colonized way of using a word forward, it creates a lot of harm because it means that we don't have the right and the autonomy to choose the words that best fit ourselves and our people.
Mhm.
So it's a big deal. It's a really, really big deal, and people don't get why. It's just jarring. Yeah. And Amy, someone in the comment says, the Slow Factory. Yes. Okay. So I can talk about that for just a second, and then we'll open it up to questions for Sivan. So, the Slow Factory, the place that put that slide out, and we've been seeing that slide in all sorts of weird places. It's come up in eating disorder conferences. It's come up in trainings that people have sort of passively and kind of mindlessly, the opposite of mindful, right, have just sort of decided, oh, this is pretty, or oh, we like the aesthetics, so we're just going to stick this in our slideshow. And essentially, Natalie, the speaker at this conference, admitted, hey, these aren't my slides. I just popped them in, right? And a lot of people have been doing that. That's what's been really difficult, right? We have someone who in the comments who I actually coached through this yesterday, who works for a practice that where Natalie consults, where she's still defending these slides, and so nothing has changed from her end. As far as the Slow Factory, we do have lawyers that we're in contact with who are exploring ways that their 501c3 might get pulled, because you're not supposed to be, that's not what 501c3s are supposed to be doing. And that's neither here nor there, but if you want to come to our free weekly consultation session, Ask a Jewish Therapist, where we consult with both other Jews and allies and aspiring allies and folks who've received a call in and want to do better, come tomorrow, 10 Pacific, 1 Eastern. It's free. It's on the JTC website, jewishtherapists.org, under consult. So I won't derail this whole thing, but there's a lot to talk about it. And hopefully the person who messaged me will pop on and share a little bit in a little while. I think you're super brave too. I know you're watching. And then let's see. So do you think we want to take some questions, Sivan? Okay, cool. So folks can either raise their hand or they can put it in the chat. It's nice to raise your hand and speak it verbally so it doesn't get lost in translation. Or if you have any thoughts that have come to mind or anything that you wish you could say to Sivan that you hadn't had a chance to, feel free and use the raise hand feature in your bar in the bottom of the Zoom. Or just come off mute. I see Emily. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, so I'm zooming in from Aotearoa, New Zealand. Thank you very much for such an open opportunity to join something where I have an opportunity to learn. So I'm not Jewish. I think, is the term goy, or is that for a particular type of non-Jewish person?
You know, it's just the Yiddish for non-Jew. I think people say it's a slur the same way people say that cisgender is a slur. It's not supposed to
Oh,
be one. So, but yeah, welcome. Thank you for being an
thank you.
ally.
So I came here to learn mostly because I actually thought that Zion meant something very different from what you described, Sivan. And thank you for this event, and thank you for being so articulate and generous, I thought, with the way you opened your comments at Is It. I wasn't there, and I just heard about this thing. I've been living under a rock for the last while. We've been dealing with our own stuff in Aotearoa. But so I went on this massive search to try and understand what Zionism is. And I would love it if, and I don't want to co-opt this whole thing because this is a place for mostly for people who aren't like me. But I looked on Wikipedia and I had the thought that what is described there is very different from what you described, Sivan, both in your comments and in what I've seen later on. And I had the thought that this might be a priority for you as a collective or somebody to edit. Because a lot of people, when they're trying to figure out what Zionism is, like someone who's total newbie, will go to that kind of place, and it's real different from what you've described. And if you could point me in the direction, and I swear to goodness, it won't just be for me. I will provide it to other people as well. So it will. Your time will be. Your labor will not be just for one person alone, in the direction of some reading that I can do that describes what Zionism is, because I think that was the biggest, if I'm understanding things right, that was the most hurtful part, that there's this co-op co-opting of this term and then broadening it out in a way that just maintains anti-Semitism, which I'm completely against. And I think what's happened to Jewish people is appalling, and what happened on October 7th is also appalling.
Thank you so much, by the way, for coming. I think it's amazing to have non-Jewish allies here, so I really appreciate it. And yeah, it's a great question. The misinformation, I think, it's a big part of why we are here. Wikipedia, there's a whole thing with Wikipedia and them changing the definition of Zionism and other Jewish things. In terms of readings, the book, it's called Israel, A Simple Guide to the Most Misunderstood Country on Earth by Noah Tishby. It's a really great resource. She talks about her own experiences and then also just kind of a little bit of history of Israel and Zionism. Dan Hoffman posted something, posted a link to the ADL. There's also a YouTube channel, I think it's called Jewish Unpacked, and they have lots of just like short, very digestible videos about Jewish history and culture, and there's a couple on Zionism as well. So I'd start there.
Thank you.
Those are great. And I would add, if you're on Instagram, there's a woman who she's actually a jeweler and she's kind of an accidental activist who has this beautiful way of composing and unpacking anti-Semitic discourse. And the handle is Roots Metals. So ROOTSMETALS. And you can probably put her into Google too and get her page. But she unpacks all of the hot button stuff and pretty quickly from after it comes out. And so, I mean, I think it's really digestible and relatable, and she kind of helps make sense of everything still through a really wonderful social change kind of lens. Zena.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sivan. It was wonderful. And like, I'm just so in awe of you being able to do what you did and stand up, and especially, being a newer person, emerging into the field at a professional conference is like so inspiring. One of the things that it seems, and I wonder if you would talk about this, is you have a really solid Jewish education and background, and you're really grounded in like a Jewish day school, even if it's a, conservative day school or whatever. And like how necessary a really good, solid Jewish education is for our kids, and for just sort of like that as I know we're on the therapy side of things and everything, but it's sort of like there's no way we're going to just sort of be able to like sort of add these things in out of nowhere, that people have to have the education and sort of the love of Zion also like from an earlier age. So I don't know about that and about how that speaks to you.
Yeah. I mostly went to public school as a kid, but Hebrew school on, after school a couple, whenever, once a week, twice a week. My mom is also Israeli, so that definitely has influenced a lot of my identity and Zionism. I think, yeah, whether we have our kids are in Jewish day schools, public schools, non-Jewish private schools, I think having a strong sense of Jewish identity is really important, especially, in the teen years and before college, when you get to a place that is, even if you had like a strong Jewish community and Jewish background. I know for me, and I know for a lot of others, like once you step into college and everybody hates Israel, and it's even worse now, that can be a really big shift, and it can be really hard to hang on to your Jewish identity when, all the, your friends and the people your friends, your professors, whoever are telling you to think differently. So yeah, I think Jewish education and Jewish identity is going to look different for everybody. So yeah, I guess I would say, I think just incorporating it as much as you can. Maybe it's, being more conscious of like celebrating Jewish holidays. Maybe it's, teaching Hebrew to your kids, whatever. Like, yeah, the more that we can incorporate that, I think that's how we're going to have a stronger Jewish generation.
Awesome. We've got a couple in the chat. So I think the first one I saw was, do you know if Natalie is still leading the department and working with students at Villanova, where she has been working.
Yeah, as far as I know, I don't think she teaches anything, but she was slash is the director of the counseling services. Um, so last I checked, she still was. I haven't been checking really because that just is gonna be bad for my mental health. But I know there was a lot of pushback. Villanova got a lot of angry calls and emails, and I think they might have said something about how, she doesn't represent their values. They are a private university, so I don't know what they're like funding, what that looks like. Um, but yeah, as far as I know, she's still there.
Yeah, and good call on like not fixating, because I think sometimes it can be really hard not to look away.
Yeah, it was definitely hard at first. I had some very supportive people in my life be like, Sivan, gotta take a step back.
Yeah, yeah. I just want to read this one out loud, because the person just put their initials, but they said, I just want to say how incredibly brave Sivan has been. I was blown away by her response, incorporating DBT skills in the moment and pointing out the errors of Natalie's slides. Thank you. I am so happy to hear you felt the support immediately from others in the room at the conference. And if you feel comfortable, can you speak to if you received any negative aftermath due to your comments becoming public and how you handled them?
Yeah, I thank you. I was very fortunate in that there wasn't really much negative, at least, I'm sure people said things about me to each other, but like there wasn't much of anything directed towards me. A couple of, uneducated comments on social media from people I knew, like went to college with, who were like, but context and blah blah blah. But nothing like major. Um, there are some people in my thankfully they're not in my PhD cohort now. They were in the first 3 years of our graduate program, the educational specialist degree. Um, and I saw them for the first time since we graduated last June. So I saw them a couple weeks ago for a school psychology conference. And I was doing a poster on my Jewish high school's response to October 7th. And so a couple of people from the first part of my program just wouldn't look me in the eye. So I don't know about how much of that had to do with that specific conference or just in general, me being an Israeli and Zionist, but I have been very fortunate. I know a lot of people have not been as fortunate. And again, I'm sure that there are things that being said about me, but thankfully it's not directed to me. So
Yeah. It's when you talk about people averting their eyes, like we learn how shame is, shaming other people or kind of excising them or not seeing them as a really powerful tool of in unfortunately behavior shaping and culture shaping. And I hope they learn. I hope they can do better in the future. And that's just not is not becoming of the people who did it. And I'm glad that you've been kind of bookended by more positive support too. Um, I have a few others when I read, and then everybody, we can't see everyone. I can only see like 6 of you. So if you've got a question, use the raise hand feature in the bottom of your Zoom. Um, so this one is from Keely. Thank you for using your voice, Sivan, and thank you, Helena, for your good work. I appreciate this opportunity to hear more about what happened. I'm so glad you found support. And then I got a direct message from someone. I don't know if that's because she doesn't want her name used, but Sivan, your response brought tears to my eyes. Thank you so much. No one has yet stated what Zionism was at that point, so proud and so proudly until you spoke and you empowered me. So yeah, right there with
Me,
you.
Sivan.
thank you.
Yeah, that was Valerie. And let's see, any other questions, comments, reflections? Oh, somebody else says, JP says, I shared the video of you standing up at the conference to many, both Jewish and non-Jewish psychologists, and everyone, including myself, were so impressed with how steady, articulate, honest and generous you were, despite what was so incredibly painful and activating. You are a lot of people's hero.
Thank you.
Um, Yeah, and I'm seeing like folks are kind of clapping with the mute on. And yeah, so we have Marley, feel free to share. I'll let you kind of share what the experience was because I don't want to speak for you. But I'm so glad you're here tonight and connecting tonight too. So where'd you go?
Yeah, I don't want to take away from Sivan because what you did, but I do want to just say that what you did inspired me. And I don't have any family that is Israeli, but I still feel a strong connection. I've been to Israel, and I have people in my life I know very strongly connected to Israel. And I, where I work at a private group practice, and I just became a licensed therapist last year. I'm 25. This is like a very kind of intense time for me to be getting into the field and dealing with all this anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. But in front of like I work at a large group practice, and Dr. Natalie had presented those slides probably to us a few days before that conference that you were at. And then, I was so refreshed to see that you had spoken up. And then it was a slow process. I had processed it with my supervisor for a long time. And I don't want to say finally, but we finally met as a staff with Dr. Natalie yesterday. And you inspired me to speak up and really explain what was going on and why it continues to be such an issue. And unfortunately I got some worse worse as kind of expected from Dr. Natalie. Like, she doubled down, and for just as an update for people, that she essentially confirmed that she knew the slides were harmful and she apologizes for the harm it caused to Jews, but she shares them because she agrees with the slide essentially. And that was really, really hard to process. And she was trying to kind of debate me on what percent of Jews are Zionists. And I honestly, Savon, like thought of just how you stood up so graciously and was trying to monitor that, like, in my own way and try to be mindful. And I'm so glad that you spoke up and that it gave me the courage to do that. And of course, the result was not what I wanted. Not that I necessarily wanted anything from her, but she made it very clear it was intentional that she shared those slides and she knew what it was going. So it just kind of confirms everything. And I'm glad that you were able to speak up, and I'm sure it's motivated many others as well. So thank you so much again.
Thank you. And thank you for saying something to her and for having the bravery to do it, especially in like a smaller setting where you actually like have to have a conversation with her. Something that was really helpful that somebody told me right afterwards, like the next day, she was saying that like you can imagine like in any given room, you imagine that there's 10% of people on one end who agree with you, and then 10% on the other end who are on the extreme where they disagree with you and are not willing to see things from your perspective, like Natalie, and then the 80% who are in the middle. And some of those people might be leaning more towards like agreeing with you. Some of them might be leaning more towards not, but they're still open. A lot of them are not educated, and so they just need more information. And that 80%, that's who you're speaking to. Even if you're speaking directly to the extreme people, it's not about changing their minds because that can be a futile effort. But it's about educating the people who are in the middle, who are actually open to change, even if you're not speaking directly to them. And that is something that was really helpful when it became very clear that like she was doubling down and stuck in her ways. That it's not about her. She's just a symptom of the problem. And so framing it that way was really helpful for me.
That's super, super wise. And it kind of goes to something that I want to ask you too. Like sometimes these big pieces of advocacy, like, we hope that we can move the person who is very, very stuck and kind of really invested in their harmfulness. But you're right, like there's these spectators here that could be swayed, either helped not to become radicalized toward harm, or help to be pulled in and grow their allyship with diverse minority populations, to include Jews. And so they kind of have that. So, what are some other motivations, like if you think of any, that why you do advocacy, why you take an advocacy step that might not do the big thing, but has other yields?
Yeah. I mean, I, you know, when she was talking and doing the slides before, I went up and said anything, I just kept thinking about the people who don't have the knowledge and the education to know why what she's saying was so harmful, and the trickle down effect that that was going to have, on their clients. A lot of them are supervisors and professors, and do their own trainings. And so it goes so far beyond just them. And so thinking about the trickle down effect was helpful for me in understanding, why it was important to say something, even if I wasn't going to change her mind specifically. That it's about looking at the big picture. And then also, like, even if it's changing one mind, even if it's planting the seed in somebody else's mind, you know, showing um, courage and standing up for what you believe in and for your community, I think holding on to that is really helpful. And also it's good, you know, for me, having like the, my Jewish and Israeli pride, and not shying away, not, giving into shame, and just being like very loud and open, and still respectful and skillful and effective, is just for my own mental health. I can walk away feeling good about myself.
Yeah. Now, as far as professional spaces where you network and connect and learn and grow with people, I know that you've got the JTC. You've also got, like, there's the listserv for Psych Against Antisemitism, and there's also like so many options that are not Jewish, as well, that are sort of more general, that have some concerns concerning behavior, concerning leadership and alignments and stuff. What spaces do you love, and how do you determine when not to engage in a space that should perhaps be safe but isn't?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's kind of doing those pros and cons and like looking at the cost benefit of, am I, how impactful a space. If it's a space where it's, an anti-Zionist space, then okay, the likelihood that I could actually change anyone's mind in there is probably pretty low. And that would maybe not be worth it for like my own mental health. But in a space where, again, I can picture 80% of people somewhere in the middle and more likely to actually enact change, I think can be a helpful way of looking at it. And also just, I don't think that there's a hard and fast rule. I think it also depends on like where I am, how my own mental health is, what's going on in my life, and if I feel like I have the capacity to put myself out there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. JP wants to know, I'm confused about the International DBT organization allowing non-scientific slides. Have they come forward with any accountability?
Sort of. They sent an email maybe 2 weeks after the conference, 2 or 3 weeks, apologizing, saying that they were, they acknowledged the harm that they caused and they were going to work towards repair. That email, I think, was a good start. Unfortunately, that nothing else has happened publicly. Most of the board members have resigned. I don't know their individual reasons for resigning, but so they've had a lot of internal shifts. And I know that some, influential people in the field have expressed their concerns to them, that there was a really nice email sent that got the signatures of a lot of, big names in the DBT world. And as far as I know, the board did not respond to that either. So
Yeah.
a little bit, not much, unfortunately, which is very disappointing because, this was an organization that I really admired. And DBT is it's such a small world. So there's not, like another organization like that. it's a small community. So to see that happening, especially as somebody who is, you know, still in school and wants to be in this community, I think that was another hard thing for me to wrestle with, was just that like disappointment.
Yeah, and it's so hard because, like, so many Jewish concepts and then Jews who were sitting between two worlds of, like, the dominant society and the cloistered Jewish space, you know, all throughout our history have put so much into psychology and mental health and wellness, you know, that to see spaces that we essentially planted the seeds for, you know, excising us is really hard. Um, I hope it changes. I have faith it'll change. Any other questions? I just put I repasted in the the chat, like about some other events that we have coming up. Everything is no fee, except for the retreat, obviously. Like that's a thing. But we kept it as low as possible. And so if anybody wants to come together and just, you know, get a chance at rest and joy and reprieve, and come meet Sivan and I in person, up in the Northwest in May, that link is there too. So feel free to check those out. It should be a nice balance of learning and spirituality and connection.
Rebecca, your comment about dialectics being such a Jewish concept, that's
Ooh.
really funny to me because I agree. I think DBT is very Jewish coded. Um, when I was teaching, so there's, you know, DBT Steps A, which is the school, like teaching DBT skills in schools. And I was teaching it at last year as an elective in my high school. And when I was introducing the concept of dialectics, one of my students raised his hand and is like, wait, which rabbi came up with this? He thought it was like a specifically Jewish thing. It's like Rabbi Linehan. That was very funny.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Thanks, Dan. Oh yeah, also yeah, shout out to Dan Hoffman and the ABCT Jewish SIG. That's been a really amazing and supportive group.
Yeah, and Dean
Right.
McKay too. Is he here?
Yes.
I don't know if he's here.
I don't think he's here today, but no, Dean is a wonderful mentor and a big proponent of everything with the fight against anti-Semitism in academia and psychology. We're trying to make some waves.
Yeah. Do you have anything bubbling away in the cauldron that you would like to share about, Dan, while you're here?
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Gonna channel a little
If you want.
Simpsons. Have a lot of things. So the first thing is that we messed up and we need to fix it. We submitted an ethics complaint to the wrong ethics department in PA against Natalie Emmons. So apparently we have to submit it to a different one. So it was unfortunate to hear, but I'm glad to hear in a sense that she's still up to her tricks. And that's a problem that's ongoing. So we can quote that as an ongoing problem when we resubmit it to the right ethics department. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we have a whole bunch of people submitting to the next upcoming conference at ABCT on various topics about anti-Semitism, about everything with nuances, with treating Jews, with myth busting, about stereotypes, about anti-Semitism, a lot of cool stuff like that. We're trying to set up a whole series of webinars with the ADL. That's upcoming. We're still trying to figure out the finances for that. And we have another person who's got experience with Hasbara, with propaganda. And so I'm trying to get him in maybe later this summer to do a speech on what actually does work and what doesn't work, what backfires when we try to speak with people outside of our allies, I guess. So there's a whole bunch of things in the works so far. Feel free to catch us on Facebook and stay tuned. We're the ABCT special. I hate the term special interest group. Sounds very like Elders of Zion, but you know, it's the ABCT group for Jewish issues in cognitive behavior research and therapy.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be a member of ABCT to join or anything like that, but come check us out.
That's awesome. I mean, you guys are doing such amazing work, and anything we can do to amplify it, like, just, you know where to reach me. So
Thank you. I've been sharing all of your presentations with our group too, because you do so much. We're learning from you, Helena.
yeah. Yeah, well, open door, and it's just been wonderful to watch you guys work. Daniel, like, I mean, you guys are just cranking it out, and just the way that, I mean, you and Dean and the others, like the way, I mean, I've never seen a more beautifully referenced piece than the one that came out that you guys did after the Edmund situation.
A couple of other papers that are in the works too that we're waiting to get vetted.
So juicy, so brilliant, so
We
any
actually APA, by the way, just reached out to us,
okay,
right?
yeah.
For those of you who are on the other listserv, I'm on so many now, I can't keep them straight. I think it's American Jewish Psychologists or Psychologists Against Antisemitism. So I've been asking for advice on that because I'm brand new to anything politics. But I'm getting some feedbacks and some suggestions from people about what and how to go about that. So they want Mitch Prinstein, who is one of us and an ally, reached out. He's also a longtime ABCD person, so he wants to set up something with us. So the question is, who is the us? And is that going to be a few people? Is that going to be a larger meeting? Is that going to be a whole committee worth of people? I don't know yet. So we're trying to gauge interest and figure what that might be.
Yeah.
But if you want to reach out to me about anything, here's my address. And I'm going to give my other address.
Cool. And I'll send you and Marley a group email later so you can connect with her about the continued
Thank you. Yeah, that was super
legacy of Natalie. Yeah. Anyone else?
By the way, Sivan is amazing. I mean, I'm sorry I came in late with parenting. But I can't tell you what it was like at the convention right after Sivan said what she said. We saw the videos, we saw the slides, and oh my gosh, she's a powerhouse. And I can't wait to see what you do with your career.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, Dan is just one of the like many amazing supportive people who I met after because of what happened and made these connections that I wouldn't have otherwise. My dad actually joked, he was like, you should email Natalie and like thank her for opening all these doors and giving you these opportunities. And I think, yeah, I think it just goes to show like, even if people aren't going to agree with you and even if there's going to be downsides, I think standing up for what you believe in and sticking to your values, people will, obviously not everybody, and hopefully most people will respect that, whether or not they agree with you. And the risks were definitely worth it. And I know I was lucky and not everybody is as lucky, and it doesn't always turn out badly. I feel like that's what you hear about a lot. That's what gets shared. It doesn't always turn out badly.
Yeah. Well, and to piggyback on that, if anybody is at a conference or sees some advocacy and you see someone being brave like Sivan, like low-hanging fruit but vital fruit is reach out to them and thank them for what they're doing, because that's the piece that helps us all rise, and that's the piece that lets someone who's done something brave really move forward in strength and connection. So think about that the next time you witness something really lovely and brave and spirited coming from someone in our community. So yeah. All right, you guys, I'm going to turn the recording off and I'm going to unpin us so that we can leave it to informal chat. And for those who need to head out, feel free. And we'll be posting the recording on the website. Probably give us within the month because we have to edit and stuff. But that'll be available to everybody, along with Michelle Whitkin's presentation on Jewish considerations in OCD, and Dana Cohen's upcoming presentation, Jewish cultural considerations in eating disorders. So